Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. Tensions between Washington and New Delhi have hit a new low, driven by White House advisor Peter Navarro's scathing ex-post today. Navarro accuses India of being, and I quote, a strategic freeloader, claiming its purchase of Russian oil fuels the war in Ukraine, acting as a financial lifeline to Putin's war machine. He insists Delhi must, quote, act like a strategic partner if it seeks that status with the United States, a demand that underscores a sharply deteriorating relationship. Now, this comes just 2 days before a critical meeting between Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, and Prime Minister Modi in Tianjin. That'll be on Sunday. It could fundamentally reshape India-China ties. That's the hope. A potential thaw, possibly boosting trade, might shift India's global alignment, impact its relationship with the United States further. But all of this at the larger level, and let's talk about this, what India will not accept are condescending messages from a White House advisor whose messages expose a lack of understanding and out-and-out hypocrisy. If, for example, India is fueling the Ukraine-Russia war, then how is America helping by continuing to arm Kiev, something Donald Trump decided to stop doing a few months back before changing his mind? Why is China not being sanctioned for its oil imports from Russia, which are larger than India's? And what about America's import of Russian uranium hexafluoride for its nuclear industry, palladium for its EV industry, fertilizers, as well as chemicals? Is this the way a strategic partner should be treated? So the question on Left, Right and Centre this evening, is the India-US strategic partner dead in the water, at least for the moment? Joining us now, Richard Rosso, Senior Advisor and Chair on India and Emerging Asia Economics at CSIS. Einar Tangen joins us as well, Ambassador Funchok Stoptan and Dr. Tara Kartha. Thank you all very much for being with us. Richard Rosso, to you first. To refer to India as a strategic freeloader, among all sorts of descriptions which Peter Navarro has now used, it just seems that America isn't interested in this relationship anymore. It really does seem that, because every day there is more rhetoric. It's all coming from Washington by and large. India is largely quiet in terms of our government. Does this signify a change in how Washington sees New Delhi?
Yeah, it's a pretty significant change. I think with the Biden administration, we had challenges, lots of challenges, and some of those were emanating from Delhi, some of those from Washington. But there was so much positive on the side on commercial cooperation, on security cooperation, that we were able to look past those and have successful summits and really move the ball forward in strategic cooperation. Right now, it appears just to get this relatively modest trade agreement across the finish line, that they're pulling out all the stops, putting a lot of pressure, pushing political buttons, which, President Trump last time he was in office would certainly poke Modi, Prime Minister Modi, for trade issues such, but wouldn't try to hit some of the political underpinnings that support the BJP. And this time, it seems the gloves are off for some reason. But you're right, it is inspiring to see that New Delhi is treating this very maturely, not fighting back, trying to find a pathway forward. So, there's still a chance we can save this, but right now it looks like in Washington, they're just driving the plane into the ground as fast as they can.
Why would they want to do this? I mean, because at this stage, it's no longer really about the trade deal. I mean, that was what it started with. But now it is, in your words, driving the plane to the ground. Why would America want to do this from a broader diplomatic standpoint? Forget the trade business, all right? I think we're beyond that at this stage.
Well, we're not beyond that. President Trump is so very focused on helping any American company, any American exporter, any way that they possibly can. Some of the things, India definitely is providing a lifeline to Russia. That's not false. India does have a massive trade imbalance with the United States. So some of the underpinnings, but to pull out all the stops and put this level of pressure, and especially on Russia, where India has been singled out, if there had been a broad sanctions program, if President Trump put his weight behind legislation that's been pending in the Capitol for quite some time to provide broad blanket sanctions against countries that buy Russian oil, would have been understandable in a lot of ways. But this unique pressure, it has a lot of us surprised and our heads spinning.
Mr. Rosso, what about the larger issue of American hypocrisy in this? America, per India, imports Russian uranium hexafluoride for America's nuclear industry, palladium for the EV industry, chemicals, fertilizers. China imports more oil than Russia. And then India gets targeted. And it's called Modi's war, even though America continues to to arm Kiev?
Yeah. That's why, again, I think it comes down to the trade deal. I don't think this is a shift in U.S. policy towards Russia. It feels like that. It sounds like that sometimes, but I really think this is just another lever, one that is way too big for what we're trying to accomplish, to try to get this trade agreement across the finish line, for Prime Minister Modi to give up some of the things that India simply can't give up, market access and basic agriculture. I firmly understand most Indian farmers, which is half of the working population, can't get agriculture product into the United States because India's supply chains are underdeveloped, cold chain storage, and so some of the areas that President Trump's pushing on, I understand, are real political red lines. And unfortunately, I don't think President Trump has somebody that's in his ear that can say this is a true red line. So that they're using unimaginable weight and a lot of issues they wouldn't have expected to be on the table. So I do think at the end of the day, a lot of this does come down to the trade agreement. Even though they're throwing so much at the wall, it feels like it's a larger issue. But I think the deal's the thing.
Sure, fair enough. Aina Tangen, do you believe this is hardball by the Trump administration to get a trade deal with India, and that all of the rhetoric that's coming out of Peter Navarro at this stage is just that, rhetoric?
Well, Peter is kind of a dog. He's let off the leash when the White House lets him. The fact that he's been tweeting for a number of days now and the rhetoric has been escalating indicates that Trump approves. If he didn't, he'd shut him up. So at this point, I understand my colleague's idea that this is about trade, but trade is not when you go to a country and say, look, capitulate. I think Donald Trump thought that because Europe just kind of rolled over and played dead, that India would do so also. Remember, he is a bully, and this is go. But I have fundamental misreading. This is not about trade. The trade with India is fairly small for the United States. Yes, there is a trade imbalance, but the fact is the U.S. has been running trade imbalances for since immemorial. So at this point, that's a false narrative, in my opinion. What Donald Trump and Washington, what keeps them up at night, is this idea that India, along with Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa, and other 5 nations, including Indonesia, will turn around and say, look, we control 40% of the world's GDP. We have the major markets, the population, the land, the resources, and 4 times as much manufacturing as you do. It's time for you to knock it off. If you want to put tariffs and have your people pay them, fine.
Yeah.
But put them across the board uniformly. Do not start trying to pick on nations and play this Hunger Games scenario where you think it's America's right to go to other countries and make them knuckle under and support the American economy. Doesn't work. Every country has its own sovereignty, and they want to have their own path to prosperity. That does not mean shoveling money into Washington's coffers while they spend it like a drunken sailor.
Right. Ambassador Snobdan, I think given the sensitivities we have over here, and I would suggest one of the areas where our External Affairs Ministry is most sensitive is when somebody preaches to us, talks down at us in a condescending tone, which is exactly what Peter Navarro is doing. Strategic freeloading, madness. If India, the world's largest democracy, wants to be treated like a strategic partner of the US, it needs to act like one, right? The road to peace in Ukraine runs through New Delhi, and there's a picture of Modi praying. I mean, this is, but for the fact that he actually did it, right? Which is offensive to many. It's bizarre. Is that your sense that, as well as somebody who's been a diplomat for so long, Delhi doesn't like people talking down upon us in a condescending tone?
Absolutely. I agree. I agree with the previous speakers also, because trade was never the issue. I think the problem with the United States on India is that, on the first place, I don't think there was any clause in our strategic partnership that we can't do business with others when we signed in 2016 or whenever we signed. Secondly, I think India is being used as a scapegoat in this entire war in Ukraine, Russia, whatever they are doing. The United States, flip-flop on that. Secondly, I think my understanding is that United States always use India as a pawn against China. But Donald Trump's change is that for him, China is more important than India in terms of economics, in terms of trade, in terms of business. So I think he's true to himself, is a very transactional thinking, and he's sticking to that. And I think the way Indian government has responded is very mature, very balanced. I don't think we have given up all our efforts on the United States. Hopefully they come back to their sense and we get back. But I also have a sense that our elite in India will never be comfortable with China. They'll get back to United States in some way or the other. That's been the history I've seen in the last 50 years. I mean, the elite means the political elite or the bureaucratic elite. I'm not one of them. I'm not a fan of United States. But point is that that's how our culture is also, is so much into the United States. In the last 16 years, we've been focusing only on United States at the expense of others.
Okay, point taken. Ainardangan, would you like to respond to that with a reply to my specific question, which is, do you expect a breakthrough on Sunday or Monday between Xi and Modi? Something substantial.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm not saying there's a willingness, but I would defer to the ambassador. There is certainly a lot of history. There are a lot of things that need to be done. But what I do expect is that there will be a ordered process where the leaders give direction to their respective governments to start accomplishing things, to work through things step by step. I mean, this is not these are mature countries. These are civilizations. They don't govern by tweet. That's something that's reserved to the United States and Donald Trump. So what I expect is it's not about blockbusters. It's about careful planning. I mean, the nonsensical part, and I think the ambassador can back me up, that on a fast track with a normal trade relationship, it would take 18 months to harmonize and figure out all the details. Donald Trump sent out a letter to 180 countries, including some very confused penguins, demanding that they pay up tariffs. I mean, and then they followed up with another broadside against friend, foe, and neighbor alike. This is not diplomacy. It's not governance. It certainly is eroding Washington and America's soft power. Remember, Donald Trump was not elected once, but twice, with an interim in between. So at this point, many countries, they may be kowtowing to him. They may be smiling and saying sweet words and talking big numbers, but when they go back to their respective countries, they're figuring out how they can de-risk themselves from an unreliable and unrelenting partner that engages in the kind of hypocrisy that you outlined.
Okay. Tara, the other part of what was actually mentioned by Mr. Navarro was, the fact that India continues to import weaponry from Russia. Now, that can never change. And I think that's a red line New Delhi would never be willing to sort of allow anybody to cross. India imports weapons from whoever we want. And there's a history over there. And what do we do with all the Russian weaponry? Throw it into the Indian Ocean. I mean, it's senseless at one level, right? And therefore, if that is an American expectation, and it's been stated as that, it does appear strange again.
I think that will be the second stage when you'll find another round of abuse from the US. Because the way we are going now looks like we are going to go back very strongly to Russia for weaponry. I mean, that is the way it's going to looking right now. Because you can't rely on these guys. I mean, the first GE engine has come, which is great. That is a separate issue because they have supply chain issues. Nonetheless, there is a sense here that you can't rely on these guys, like we said, the rest of them. But I just wanted to mark something that this, this public abuse of India is making it that much more difficult for us to sort of come halfway. You cannot, as a democracy, which Trump doesn't understand, because Europe, as they are NATO partners, they've been dealing with the US for years, they have a different relationship which allows them, even then, though it's humiliating the way they caved in, that is not something India can do. And the more they shout at us, the less we are able to do something to give a little. Why is that? Because their I think what Richard said is right. I don't think there is enough expertise or somebody to tell these people what India is about, one. And there is not enough inputs going from Delhi. Delhi should know. I mean, the Delhi embassy would know that agriculture is one of the most sensitive areas for us. And yet they go on against that. So there is a mismatch of the information which is flowing. That has to be addressed. And it has to be addressed quickly. That is my key point.
Well, Mr. Navarro is the advisor who advises President Trump. I mean, if this is the advice that he's giving Trump, then that's hugely problematic. If this is anyhow, I wanted to go back across to Ajay Sethi. Mr. Sethi, I was asking Einar Tangen earlier whether he believed there would be a breakthrough between India and China. He said no, not immediately. But what about, at least a breakthrough in terms of trade? It's already been announced that border trade is going to resume, air travel is going to resume. Do you believe that that is the route towards, India and China coming closer at this stage?
So one must not forget that China is already India's largest trading partner. Much as we want to ignore, for even the years we had differences of opinion. But the fact of the matter is that right now we need the components. While Make in India strategy is a great strategy, but it will take some time to become a stronghold by itself. And we need the components. I hardly know any businessman who doesn't deal with China in one manner or the other. And therefore, to ignore it is out of the question, number one. Number two, China equally needs this very large consuming market, which virtually every big player is requiring now. In my opinion, China will want to take the market here, and they're very fast movers. By profession, I'm an investment banker. So for me, when I see the deals which China does on the table, which we saw earlier, it moves very fast. So therefore, they're coming to India as a given. So what I suspect will happen is China will press for foreign direct investments opening up, which has been closed by India. And on the flip side, we will try to secure more better trading routes with China. I have a feeling it will move at least towards, I think India is pressing for a 49% opening up of non-sensitive areas. Will we agree to give them 51%, which they are pushing for, is the big question to be seen.
Okay. And Richard Rosso, if there is an agreement between India and China on an additional Chinese supply of rare earths, which we need across industries over here, then doesn't that in a sense push India even closer to Beijing's strategic embrace, call it what you may?
Well, I think there's been a very important and nuanced review in India on how to really contribute to Make in India, the manufacturing campaign, and breaking down supply chains in areas like semiconductors, artificial intelligence, things like that. And per the previous speaker, there's just some things you simply can't produce unless you're sourcing from China, because China has done an incredible job on dominating world markets in certain components. So in Indian strategy, before it was kind of like blanket cut off trade in certain areas. Now you're seeing a more nuanced approach that I think is pretty logical, which is, India to focus on things they're good at today, invest in areas in supply chains where they can be good at tomorrow, and realize that for the next 5 or 10 years, there's a lot of items that they're going to have to source from the rest of the world, whether it's China, Japan. So it's a very sensible approach, and I think it's one that, obviously the United States too. China remains one of our 3 largest trading partners, despite the pressure on trying to reduce our reliance on China for trade. So I think Delhi's approach in that front makes a lot of sense, and there really is another pathway around it if you want to be successful in manufacturing. Some areas like rare earth elements, you're not going to get facilities up and running for 10, 15 years. So you got to make sure that you can lock down supplies when you can.
Einar Tangen, last word to you. In the past, we've seen incredible atmospherics when things were good between India and China, of President Xi and Prime Minister Modi on the banks of the Sabarmati in Gujarat, in Tamil Nadu as well, certainly in China when the Prime Minister visited. In fact, I was there covering that visit. But then things went sour. Do you foresee a more matter-of-fact approach between the two leaders, perhaps sort of gauging where each one stands, as opposed to larger celebrations and pomp, which have sort of accompanied the visits of either side in the past, quite a few years back now?
Well, there's a lot of pragmatism involved in both sides. Trust is not built up. It's built up over time and lost in an instant. And both countries understand that, but they also understand that they're neighbors. But I think it's a mistake to think that this is all about China and India. India has the opportunity to lead. It was the one who created the non-aligned movement, and now that movement is coming, be ready to be harvested. And India could lead that. And that is one of the things that Washington is afraid of. China certainly has all the power, but there's always concern about it. If India takes the forefront with the BRICS, right, it would be unstoppable. If it shows up in Washington with that kind of power, that is what makes Donald Trump lay awake at night.
Tara, last word to you. BRICS. Einar Tangen keeps speaking about BRICS and its power. Trump clearly very wary of it. And New Delhi quick to tell Donald Trump that no, we aren't looking to replace the dollar as the primary currency. Be that as it may, do you believe that, or do you see BRICS emerging, as a real challenger to the United States with a more active India involvement?
So far from what we've seen of BRICS, doesn't look good. I mean, it's not a kind of a thing I would back, and I never did even when I was in service. But I want to make one point here. The basic India-US relationship, which you just saw in Rubio's statement with Jaishankar, the number of areas you're covering, that still continues. This loud noise which you're getting from outside is not that it is extremely damaging. Like I said, if I actually want to buy US weapons and I need them, I cannot because of the noise levels.
Yeah.
So that's the problem here, because that statement, you read it very carefully. It says if the more equipment is bought, then we can go ahead with the 10-year deal, the new deal which we are about to sign, 10-year deal, major defense partner. How can I buy anything that I want because of that would be.
But you've just ordered $1 billion plus worth of jet engines from America, or you've announced an intention to do that for the Tejas. Doesn't that sort of seal that?
That is an earlier deal, and which we need.
No, the new one, just now, 62,000 crores for 100 plus Tejas jets. They need 113 engines for those, or more, in fact, plus the older ones continue, plus the one for the Tejas Mark II. I would suggest that that's wrapped up, just on the basis of this $1 mega billion deal. But Tara, I'm interrupting because I'm out of time. We can continue talking about this later. I think Sunday and Monday is going to be the big focus. That means journalists like me will not have a weekend off. And I suspect when we call Einar Tangen, he won't have a weekend off either. We leave it over there. There's a lot more coming up. Do stay tuned.